This News of the Nation is about Prince Henry. He's often referred to as Prince Henry the Navigator, and he was from Portugal. The time period we're dealing with is 1394 to 1460. And of course, the good reading strategies, we want to know we want to know the questions first so we know what we're looking for as we are reading. So number one, true or false, Prince Henry started a school of navigation. Number two, also true or false, from the time he was young, Prince Henry was always very interested in China. Number three, Sagres later became known as Prince's Town. And 4, 5, and 6 are multiple choice. Number 4, Prince Henry students A, made maps of Africa, B, learned to use compasses and other instruments, or C, both choices A and B. Number 5, the voyage around Africa that finally reached India was made by A, Prince Henry, B, Vasco da Gama, or C, Eric the Red. 6, Prince Henry was from A, Portugal, B, Spain, or C, Africa. And then we have our vocabulary. Someone who studies the earth and its features. We have to figure out what that answer is, or what that vocabulary word is. Number 8, one who controls the position of a ship on the ocean, one who sets the ship's course. We have to figure out what that vocabulary word is. Number 9, an instrument used to determine how high the sun, the moon, and the stars are. We have to figure out what that vocabulary word is. And number 10, sailors, men who sail for a living. We have to find out what that vocabulary word is. Let's go into the vocabulary. We have a geographer. A geographer is someone who studies the earth and its features. Over here to our right, we have seamen. Seamen are sailors, men who sail for a living. An astrolabe is an instrument used to determine how high the sun, moon, and stars are. And on the front, we have a navigator. Navigator is one who controls the position of a ship on the ocean, one who sets the ship's course. Now we have our vocabulary, and now I'm going to read the main article for you. Prince Henry launches Age of Exploration. Prince Henry of Portugal became interested in Africa early in his life. Before he was 18 years old, the young prince sent ships to explore the coast of Africa. By the time he was 24, Prince Henry had decided to devote his life to learning more about Africa and the far-off lands of the Indies. He went to Sagres, a lonely spot at the southwestern tip of Portugal. There he built a small village. High on a cliff overlooking a tiny harbor. Prince Henry worked and studied at Sagres for about 40 years. He started a school and invited scholars, map makers, and geographers to come there. His students studied the stars and the sea. They made maps of the coast of Africa. Prince Henry's teachers trained seamen to use compasses to find which direction their ships were sailing. They taught them to use other instruments, such as the astrolabe, to help sailors know where they were on the sea. The people of Portugal called the small village at Sagres Prince's Town. Later, their studious prince, and to be studious means that you are good at studying and you study and read a lot. Later, their studious prince became known as Henry the Navigator. Year after year, Prince Henry sent out ships to sail across the vast Atlantic Ocean. To be vast means to be big. His ships sailed farther and farther along the coast of Africa. Often his sailors stopped to explore the land along the coast. They claimed these lands for Portugal. In some places, Prince Henry's sailors built forts and traded with the people. It was not until Prince Henry died, however, that the Portuguese ships finally sailed around Africa and reached India. This voyage was made by the great seaman named Vasco da Gama. So the first one to sail around the tip of Africa to Asia was Vasco da Gama, or to reach India was Vasco da Gama. Prince Henry's maps and studies made possible this voyage and the voyages of many other explorers. The ships Prince Henry sent out to explore the coast of Africa began the great age of exploration, which continued for over 200 years. I want to pause right now so I can open up the News of the Nation and read the middle part. All right, so another story here is Prince Henry inspires young seamen. And of course, a seaman was a person that would sail on the ocean, on the sea. In the study room of the tower, Prince Henry was talking to a sea captain. He pointed to a large map on the table before him. This map shows you the places along the African coast where my sailors have landed, the prince said. As you can see, our ships have sailed nearly 2,000 miles along the western coast of Africa. Prince Henry leaned forward in his chair. I want you to sail much farther south than any of my other sea captains, he said. I believe that somewhere along the coast of Africa, you may find a sea route to the rich lands of the Indies that Marco Polo described in his book. And of course, we learned about that last week. The young sea captain shook his head doubtfully. You may be right, Your Highness, he said, but some of my men are afraid to sail so far south. No others have sailed those waters. Some think the sea there is boiling hot. Of course, the closer you get to the equator, it gets hotter, and they were afraid that the water would be boiling. The tall prince smiled and turned to the map. With his finger, he followed the western coast of Africa. Then he said, as you sail farther south, the sun seems hotter and the water of the sea is warmer. However, the sea does not boil. Tell your men not to be afraid. I shall reward them well if they succeed. Prince Henry walked to the window and nodded toward the ships in the harbor below. These ships, the whole punch there took out of words. Something these ships and sail southward along the coast of Africa, he said to the captain. Perhaps this time we shall find a sea route to the Indies. All right, then a science scene down here at the bottom. This is about the astrolabe, and this is the tool right here called the astrolabe. At Prince Henry School for the Navigators, both he and his students worked on improving the astrolabe, an instrument that helps sailors make useful measurements. A skilled mariner, that would be a person that would be sailing at sea, on the kind of like a marine, could use the astrolabe to measure latitude. And of course, we learned about latitude, the distance north or south from the equator, and to tell the time of the day. Sightings were taken of the stars and planets using a movable pointer. That would be this part of it right here. The pointer referred to positions on a circle of wood or metal suspended from a ring and marked with the degrees of a circle. Astrolabes were used as late as the 18th century, and they were especially important on the great voyages resulting from Prince Henry's hard work. So with the astrolabe, they can measure the height of the sun or the stars above the horizon. That's where they're sailing. And from that, they could determine their latitude. New technology improves navigation. Prince Henry started a school and invited scholars, map makers, and geographers to come there. They studied the stars and the sea. They made maps of the coast of Africa. They trained seamen to use compasses to find in which direction their ships were sailing. They taught them to use other instruments such as the astrolabe, that's what I just read about, mariner's quadrant, compass, and improved maps, which were made with a more exacting science. These maps showed exactly what compass course a vessel must set to go from one place to another, exactly where the reefs near a certain harbor entrance were, and exactly what tides were to be expected along a certain stretch of coastline. So with the improved school that he had set up, he made new technology which helped out the sailors. And the last thing that they made was a new kind of sailing ship, known as the caravel. Henry's greatest achievement in improving navigation was not in instrumentation or map making. It was designed completed at Sagres, and that would be Sagres, Portugal, around the year 1440 for a new kind of sailing ship, the caravel. Caravels were lighter and less bulky than earlier ocean-going ships. Instead of one mast with a very large sail, they had three masts with smaller triangular or lateen sails. This meant that fewer crewmen were needed to handle caravels than the early barcas and barrenels. Those were different types of ships. The caravel had other advantages. It could sail in shallower water than earlier ships. It could sail more directly into the wind, so they didn't need the wind at their back. And it was more maneuverable, meaning that it was easy to maneuver from place to place. And because its planks were fitted neatly together without overlapping, it glided through the water with little resistance, and so was much swifter than the earlier ships. So, with new inventions such as the caravel and the astrolabe, as well as the compass and other new inventions, Prince Henry and his men were able to sail around the tip of Africa and become the first to find an all-water route to Asia.